Hello, it's me. How are you? Today it's lesson 38. Okay, so wow, that's a lot of lessons. Now, today we're going to do a listening and reading lesson. So it's kind of like a practice of lots of the things we've talked about in other lessons, particularly in lesson 37, but also the use of past simple. So as you saw from the title, today we are looking at a personal anecdote. Okay, and remember, I always tell you things must be true to make it more meaningful. Well, the anecdote I'm going to share with you today is in fact true. It happened when I was a child. Okay, now before we start, I will show you some vocabulary. So we'll do some vocabulary related to the anecdote. Then you're going to listen to the anecdote. Then you can read and listen to the anecdote. And then finally, we will look at the language in context. Okay, so no new grammar today, just practice. Okay, so first of all, let's have a look at the vocabulary. Right, so I need my notebook here because I will have to help you. I'm sorry, I apologize in advance because I can't draw. I am not an artist. Well, I can't draw. Okay, so the first piece of vocabulary is to have lunch. Okay, thankfully I don't have to draw this. Okay, so in the morning you have breakfast, for example, coffee and a croissant. At lunchtime you have lunch, for example, fish and salad. And in the evening you have dinner. Okay, so have lunch. Have lunch at lunchtime. That's the first piece of vocabulary. The second one is school bell. Right, here we are. This is where I am going to draw. Okay, so are you ready? It's not too bad. Okay, can you see this here? Yes, this is a bell, and the bell rings, okay, at lunchtime. Okay, right. So that's the school bell. And also we have playground. Now, what is a playground? In a school, okay, so you have a school, for example, this is the school. Okay, this is the school here, the building. And then the children play these are the children. The children play outside. And this area here is called the playground. Okay, so that's the playground. It's the ground outside where the children play. Okay, next piece of vocabulary. It's here on the screen. To pick someone up. To pick someone up. Now, for example, to pick someone up, it's a phrasal verb, and it means to collect someone. So, for example, I go to the school to pick my children up, or I go to the school to pick up my children. It's a phrasal verb that's separable. Okay. And let's see, the last two pieces of vocabulary are related. I'll put them on the screen. Okay, so you can see here I've got two pieces of vocabulary. You've got infant school and primary school. Infant school in the UK, you go from 5 to 7, and 4.5, 5, 7. And then primary school, you go from 7 to 11, 12, it depends. Okay, so they're young children. All right, so that should help you understand the anecdote. Okay, so now I am going to tell you the anecdote. Wait 1 moment. Okay, so this anecdote is from when I was a child. So when I was a child, I went to a primary school near my parents' house. Many children used to have lunch at school, but my brother and I used to go home for lunch. When I was around 10, I used to pick up my brother from the infant school. He was younger than me. Well, he still is younger than me. And so I used to pick him up, and then we used to walk home together. My mum used to wait outside the house for us, and we used to go home, and we used to have sandwiches for lunch and then play in the garden or watch TV. I loved going home for lunch. Now, one day, the school bell rang, and I left the school and I walked to the infant school to pick up my brother. There was a teacher in the playground who looked very angry, and she said, "Go back to school." I didn't understand. Why was the teacher angry? Then I realised it wasn't lunchtime. It was only 10:30. I ran back to the school in a complete panic. When I arrived at the school, I was very upset. I cried and cried and cried. My teacher was so worried about me that she wasn't angry. She knew it was just a mistake. I never made that mistake again. Oh, it's sad when you're a child, because for me to leave the school when it's not permitted was a really, really big, like a really big mistake. I felt terrible, and I remember that day. I really remember. It's fixed in my memory. Okay, so now I'm going to put the text on the screen, and I'm going to read. I'd just like you to read and listen. You can pause the video at any moment if you want to look for vocabulary or you want more time to understand. Just pause the video. That's okay. All right, but now I'm just going to read it so that you have an opportunity to read and listen. Okay, 1 moment. Let me just organize. Go back. Okay. Right. Are you ready? Okay. When I was a child, I went to a primary school near my parents' house. Many children used to have lunch at school, but my brother and I used to go home for lunch. When I was around 10, I used to pick up my brother from the infant school. He was younger than me, and we used to walk home together. My mum used to wait outside the house for us. We used to have sandwiches for lunch and then play in the garden or watch TV. I loved going home for lunch. One day, the school bell rang and I left the school and walked to the infant school to pick up my brother. There was a teacher in the playground who looked very angry. She said, "Go back to school." I didn't understand. Why was the teacher angry? Then I realized it wasn't lunchtime. It was only 10:30. I ran back to the school in a complete panic. When I arrived at the school, I was very upset. I cried and cried and cried. My teacher was so worried about me that she wasn't angry. She knew it was just a mistake. I never made that mistake again. Okay, so I hope that you could follow. Remember, you can listen again and again and again and again to help kind of the association between the written word and the pronunciation. You can also practice reading the story out loud yourself. It's a good way to consolidate some of the grammar. Okay, so now we're going to look at the story again, the anecdote again, and we are going to look at some of the language in the anecdote, okay? Right, so right here is the first one. Now have a look and see if you can identify all the past tenses that we use. Okay, so now I'm going to highlight them, the different tenses that we have. Okay, you can see here, if you see, we've got past simple, for example, in the first line, was, went. We've got past habit, a repeated action that happened as a habit, like used to have lunch, used to go home, used to pick up, used to walk home together, used to wait, used to have. And the blue verbs, I have highlighted the blue verbs so that you can see here it's in infinitive because it's part of the we used to. You see above here it says we used to have sandwiches for lunch, and then we used to play. So the play comes from the used to. That's why it's not in past, it's in infinitive with play and watch. With play and watch, okay? Okay, very good. Are you ready for the next slide? Let's have a look. Okay, so now that's the second part of the story. And again, I'm going to highlight the past verbs, the past tenses of the verbs. Okay. So we've got the bell rang, the infinitive, ring. I left, the infinitive, leave. Walked. Remember, it's a past simple verb, so you need that lovely, beautiful consonant sound, walked, to pick up. Now here, notice again in blue we have the infinitive. It's called the infinitive of purpose. It is the reason why. So for example, I left the school and walked to the infant school. Why? To pick up my brother. Okay, then we've got was, the infinitive be. Looked means her face looked very angry. She said, notice the pronunciation, said no. The infinitive is say, but the past is said. Then we have a negative, I didn't understand. Was, realized, wasn't, was, and ran, the infinitive run. Okay, and for the last slide, here we are. Again, I will highlight the past simple verbs. Okay, so we've got arrived, nice, soft, arrived ending. Was, cried and cried and cried. Was, and we have worried. It says, my teacher was so worried. This so here is like an emphasis, like very, very. So worried. And worried here is an adjective, not a verb. Okay. She wasn't, knew from the infinitive know, and made from the infinitive make. Okay. So as you can see, that story has a lot of uses of the past simple. So I recommend two things. The first thing I recommend is that you listen to the anecdote again. Okay, and the second thing I recommend is that you write a little anecdote, something true. It can be something that happened to you, or something that happened to a friend, or something that happened to somebody in your family. But it must be true. And try writing the anecdote. You can use a dictionary. A dictionary is a fantastic resource. And maybe you can even send the anecdote to the Facebook page of Perfectly Spoken, and it would be really nice to get people sharing their anecdotes from all over the world. That would be fantastic. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this lesson and that you enjoyed my anecdote. It wasn't the most exciting anecdote in the world, but for me, I really, really remember that day. You know, it was it was a silly little thing, but it made quite an impact on me as a child. Okay, all right. So, go here. So, as I say, do you have any anecdotes? Write them down. Make sure they're true. Okay. That is the end of the lesson for today, and I will see you in lesson 39 very soon. Take care. Bye. I'm going now. Bye. I am going now. Bye.